Tuesday evening, America. It's Tuesday tailgate with the Idle Zone Syndicate. Matt, first on the block tonight. And Matt, I'm no takeaways, no asterisk on your first place tonight, but Jack had a club meeting tonight, so he's not going to be watching.
You mean the club's not watching us?
They should be.
They should be. Heck?
But they meet at a pretty cool place. So that's got like I want to say like 50 beers on tap.
Oh, nice.
So that's Do
they not have TVs where they could put us all over the bar? Like,
you would think.
That'd be awesome.
Why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they?
That would be awesome.
I'm going to bogart the screen for just a moment. I don't want to go any further without mentioning the disaster in Texas. And honestly, I can't wrap my head around it. It's just natural disasters like that are just, you just shake your head because what are you going to do? There's nothing they could do. Anytime something like this happens, the first thing anyone wants to do is start pointing fingers. Act to God.
Yeah, that's such an unbelievable amount of water that dropped in that area. Like, there's no way to even fathom how much water was there in such a short amount of time.
Oh, it's just insane.
Just if you watched, I've seen videos of like the radar cycle for that 12 hours where it was dropping, the chart of the water level of the river. It's just unbelievable how much water there was.
And seeing the time-lapse video of the river rising, and like it came up so many feet in like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
But horrible thing, and horrible things happen. But the kids, man, that's the rough part.
Yeah.
That is the rough part. So I don't want to be the Debbie Downer or the Dan Downer tonight, but I felt it was worthy of mention, and that our thoughts and prayers go out to all of our Texas friends and anyone else that might be affected. So peace to all of you. And let's move on and do something positive and fun. And John, how was your 4th of July?
It was good. We didn't do much. We sat around the fire pit with some guests a couple nights and watched some fireworks, and we were almost full, and I think we were one room shy of being full. And last year we weren't full at all except for family, and it was pretty somber because of the lost dog, but it was all good. Had a good time. All the guests had a good time. And that's about all we did. I cooked some ribs that turned out excellent. I'm not really sure what I did different. It was probably just the meat quality, like we talked about last time, because I really didn't change anything. Just probably got a better couple slabs better meat, and it was good.
Very nice.
How about you guys?
Well, we went to Connor's house, They had a small get together, and lo and behold, the Cranks drove up. So Dano and the Cranker and Connor all enjoying the explosives.
Everybody still got all their fingers and
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. It was pretty somber.
It was a good time.
It was. And not gonna lie, I I I thought it'd be a good idea to start taking pulls off the kids, Captain Morgan.
I think I saw that somewhere.
Yeah, that was dumb and probably entertaining to everyone,
Yes.
because now when I drink too much, I just go right to sleep. I'll go to sleep standing up. So, but other than stupid drunk grandpa, it was safe and it was fun. Everybody had a good time.
That's good. Did you have any like big displays near you, or did you go see any? Or
We didn't this year, and that's kind of odd for us. For several years, Wendy and I went to Wilson to the fireworks, just because we wanted to have something that was our own different tradition, and we started doing that. And the last one we went to, we took my dad, and that was about a month before he passed, and just didn't go back yet.
yeah,
But
understandable.
good time. We had a nice time.
Yeah,
Mine was
Fireworks.
like a long, drawn out whole weekend.
Yeah, that's pretty much it for us too.
Like, I worked on Thursday and then got off of work and immediately went to a 4th of July party on Thursday night out south of town. They had a food truck with a bunch of food, and then they did a big old fireworks display off of a couple of long bed trailers, and lasted like 30 minutes. So it was kind of crazy. Then the 4th, we had a block party in my new neighborhood, so we went to that for dinner, and then we went over to the Barrett's house. Saturday was more fireworks at my mother-in-law's, and then Sunday we went to my sister-in-law's and swam on Sunday for get together with them. So it was never ending.
yeah. Sounded like you had a good one.
Yep.
We had all kinds all around us, so we could kind of just sit here and watch. Couldn't really see the big ones, but we couldn't see Duck Creek or Horse Creek or Grove or any of that. So we just kind of watched around here. Y'all know Mark Pierce? That he fished. He's fished a bunch of nation championships from Kentucky, or lives in Tennessee, maybe Kentucky. I don't remember. Right on the border there by Kentucky Lake. He's retired military, and he does a fireworks show. He's been doing it for years, and he starts posting, him putting it all together. Well, he posted this year, and he posted the cost.
Oh no.
That dude, I think he takes donations, from friends, and then he invites all the friends over. But his costs, and this year he did fireworks, and he did a food truck, and he did ice cream truck, and he did all kind of stuff. But the fireworks part was right at $5,000.
Mm-hmm.
Woo.
And it's professional. Like he puts it all together on, boards and
Mm-hmm.
connects them all. So when he lights the fuse, they all go off. And I don't know, he may even do music, but crazy amount of, I think his total cost for his fireworks party thing was like $8,000, something like that.
Wow.
But he got enough donations to cover like all but like 1,500 of it.
That's not bad.
That's
Yeah.
a literal blowout.
Yeah, literally. I don't know if he's watching, but I didn't get my invitation in the mail this year, but maybe next year.
Well, let's hope so.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I have a friend that's a wholesaler here in Hutch and does shows for different communities. And nowadays, the large shows, you just count on between $1,000 and $1,500 a minute.
Yeah.
That's just
That's
unbelievable.
crazy.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? Sure is cool though.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I see a young man in backstage. Looks like he's driving down the highway.
He texted me and said he had flight delays. So he may have to do it on his phone. So he probably is driving down the highway. I don't know if he's driving. Is he driving?
I don't know. No, he's
No,
shaking his head no.
no.
Okay. Is Pat driving?
No.
No.
Oh, we might have another special guest on the show. Wonder who's driving. Interesting.
Nobody's driving.
It's
Nobody's
a Tesla.
driving.
Tesla self-drive.
Oh, Uber, taxi. Well, let's bring him on.
Hey, Gene.
There he is.
I'm not actually driving. I'm parked.
Oh, you're parked.
And let me see if I can get this. There, can you see where I'm parked?
Oh,
yeah.
he's parked at Bucky's.
Oh
I'm
my.
parked. I'm parked in Bucky's parking lot on I-40 at Sevierville, Tennessee.
Gene, we might have to pull you out and pull you back in. Your sound is not very good.
I'm sorry.
Your video's good.
Video's good.
I don't have many options then.
Well, let's take him out, bring him back in, see if it helps.
Yeah, see if that helps.
Let's try that.
Or maybe Gene needs to go out and come back in. Is that better?
Is that any better when I do that?
Oh, that's
That is a little better. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Cool.
Yeah. Very good. Well, Gene Gilliland is going to be our guest tonight, and we thought it would be good. He's on his way to you're on your way to the high school national championship,
College.
college national championship.
Right.
At Chickamauga?
Cherokee Lake,
Oh,
Tennessee.
Cherokee. You can tell how much I'm paying attention right now by where you're going, and we just been busy, man. We've been busy. How you been?
I've been good. We I've kind of cut back on some of my travel schedule this year because we are in the process of trying to fix up my old family farmhouse in North Texas, and we're going to have like an estate sale in October, and there's like 3 generations worth of stuff
Wow.
in the house that we're going to try to figure out how to get rid of. And at some point, my wife and I will probably wind up moving in there when I get ready to retire again.
There you go. Well, that'd be awesome.
More time for fishing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We all need more time for fishing.
Yes.
Everybody.
Yes, indeed. Gene is
So-
our first 3-timer.
Yeah.
Ah.
I mean, he should get like a golden robe or something for that.
He should. He should.
I'll get on that.
Yeah.
I'll make a note.
Order that from Amazon. They probably have them.
Yeah.
All you gotta do is,
Or Timu.
yeah. I mean, I'm sure you can find it somewhere. So you're on your way to the college national championship. So are they gonna? We wanted to have you on to talk about summertime, fishing. We had the TBF high school championship here on Grand week before last.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a few dead fish afterwards, and that caused a little bit of a stir, and it's been kind of a hot topic at Grand. So we thought it would be a good time just to have Gene on and talk about fish care and mortality and delayed mortality and what tournament organization should be doing, stuff like that. So let's start with you're going to the college championship. Are they doing anything special? Like, is it going to be a smaller creel size? Anything like that? Earlier weigh-ins? Anything like that they're going to do, that the tournament organization is doing?
The tournament day is still 8 hours. The weigh-ins are at 2:00 in the afternoon. Tennessee does have some special regulations on some of their lakes, specifically related to smallmouth bass, that you can only keep like one fish over a certain size in terms of smallmouth. So we're going to be going by whatever the prevailing regulations are. It's not a reduced limit. Now, the other thing too, that's just like your high school tournament there at Grand, this is a team tournament. So the college tournaments, there's 2 anglers, but it's one bag of fish per boat. So that alone helps cut down some of the numbers.
Yeah.
You've got 150 boats entered, but it's only one bag of fish per boat, rather than having an angler and a co-angler where you might have 2 bags of fish and a lot more fish to deal with. The main thing that I know that our Glenn Cale, our youth director, that manages the college, high school, and youth programs, they were very specific with working with the host community to make sure we have lots of ice available. And they're even going to be able to provide ice to the anglers in the mornings, not just for our use at the weigh-in itself, but for the anglers, because of the warm temperatures and that sort of thing. And tomorrow, when they do the angler briefing, we will spend a lot of time talking about fish care and encouraging the use of ice in moderation and proper aeration, and all of those tips that we want to try to get across to the the anglers that are competing, so that it's fresh on their minds, and they've got, they can prepare for the next day or 2 days or 3 days if they make the finals, to take care of their fish. The other thing that we're doing, this is kind of a new thing with bass, BASS. We have a new sponsor that is a company out of Birmingham that makes, I think they call it an oxygen concentrating system. It's, if you're familiar with medical oxygen, people that carry around little backpack kind of things, for oxygen supplement. What this device does is it takes air and strips out the nitrogen and basically leaves you with pure oxygen coming out. And we have one of our live release boats now that has been fitted with this system that we're going to be testing, that will eventually replace the oxygen bottles that we've had to carry for years. And we've already been testing one of these systems at the elite tournaments this year for the waiting line tanks backstage. And it has a lot of promise. It's this company has been in the medical oxygen business for 40 years, so they know their stuff. And the technology and the equipment, should be pretty reliable. So we're going to be working with them at this tournament, and specifically working on the live release boat, because we've used bottled oxygen on our live release boats for years, and this will just help with not having to carry as many bottles and a weight reduction, that sort of thing. At the weigh-ins, the waiting line tanks, when we get everything set up on those, it will replace the air compressors that we've been using for years, which do a pretty good job. But when you're pumping air into your tanks through some sort of air stones, air is only 21% oxygen. And as the water gets hotter and hotter, the water doesn't hold as much oxygen. And so it's more difficult to maintain good oxygen levels when it gets hot, and especially if you have lots of pounds of fish. That's where bubbling pure oxygen into those tanks, like we do in the live release boats, should make a big difference in terms of making sure that we're releasing healthy fish after the tournament. This company it's called Piranha 02, and they've got a website, and they make I guess you call it a live well version, a little tackle box size version of this that you can hook up a 12-volt system and bubble pure oxygen into your live well. Then they make 2 or 3 different sizes of these devices depending on what you're trying to oxygenate. So I think it has a lot of promise. We've been trying to get with each of the state fish and wildlife agencies everywhere we've gone to set this system up so that they can look at it, because I think from a state fishery standpoint, it could be something they could use on their hatchery, their fish hauling trucks, or in hatcheries instead of using bottled oxygen. We're still going to keep our bottled oxygen and our air compressor systems on hand as backups just in case. So we're not going to completely abandon the old technology, but it will eventually be replaced and become just a backup system in case something happens to the Piranha systems. This company has partnered with Bass. They've also partnered with MLF. They're going to provide the same kind of systems for the live release boats and the tournaments that MLF runs, where they actually weigh in fish, not the Bass Pro Tour, because it's a catch, weigh, and release, but all of the other, as I understand it, maybe even all the way down to the BFLs. I'm not sure if they're going to go that far downstream, but has a lot of promise. And so, we're going to be doing a lot of testing of that. I've got Tennessee Wildlife Resources biologists coming over to the weigh-ins this week with their oxygen meters, and they're going to be helping us test this equipment as we load fish onto the tanks of the live release boat. You can check the oxygen in the tanks with no fish and it looks great. But once you put 50, 100, 200 pounds of bass in there, and there's a demand on that oxygen, those fish are using it. We want to make sure that this system is capable of keeping up and maintaining the oxygen levels we need to keep those fish healthy. And so that's part of what I wanted to get the biologist to come over and help us evaluate that. So that's kind of where we're headed this week. That's really my role, my goal in coming over to this tournament this week. It's a good, call it a hot weather test of these systems, kind of extreme conditions. And I'm guessing the water temperatures are probably pushing 80, if not a little more. The air temperatures here in East Tennessee have been in the mid to high 80s for quite a while. I think they had some 90-degree temperatures, a few days ago. So water temperatures are getting up there, and that's when it's really, really critical, because, to the theme of tonight's show, mortality related to bass tournaments is directly related to water temperature. And that's been shown over and over, that the hotter the water, the more likely you are to have fish that die as a result of going through being caught and live welled and weighed in and so on. So summertime conditions it gets pretty tough. And the real key is from the angler standpoint is making sure that you're just being more conscientious and taking care of those fish. There's a lot of things that they can do. You can't just toss them in the live well and flip a switch and forget about them for 8 hours. And that's what we're going to really try to impress on the anglers tomorrow at the briefing. That you've got and I think you probably saw this 2 weeks ago at Grand Lake with these national level events. You got kids coming from all over the country.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what your water temperatures at Grand were, probably pushing 80.
Yep. Right at 80.
You got kids that probably fished that tournament that have never seen water temperatures that high if they're from up north.
Yeah.
And so they don't know what to do. And that's a big part of the challenge, especially when you have these events that have that national scope, is you're going to have a lot of anglers that, one, they may not know what to do, and two, they may not have the equipment or the things that they need, the tools that they need to be able to keep fish healthy. And so that's one of the big challenges. We see this at all of those, whether it's high school or college, even the open tournaments that Bass runs, the Bass Nation Championship. Sometimes you wind up with anglers there that are facing conditions that are just drastically different from what they're used to, and I don't mean this in a mean sort of way, but they may be just ignorant of what needs to be done. They just don't know. They don't know what they don't know. And
Right.
and that's I guess been our biggest challenge over the last 20, 30 years in terms of trying to educate anglers on, fish care protocols is making sure they understand how critical it can be, especially when the water gets hot.
So go over that right quick. What should my live well procedure be this time of year?
The first thing that we recommend people do is fill up your live wells early in the day. That's when the water's the coolest. And the other thing that we suggest is buy a little floating swimming pool thermometer that you can keep in your live well so that you can monitor temperatures. Or if you want to get real sophisticated, some of the sonar units allow you to put a sensor in your live well that you can hook and have a display on your sonar unit. But you want to be able to monitor the water temperatures. The thing that we want to try to recommend is when the water is 75 degrees or less, you can just turn your freshwater pumps on and just pump fresh water continuously. And by continuously, I mean don't use the timer. Turn it on manual full time and just let it run. And in general, your fish will be okay in those situations. Now, obviously, you can't pump fresh water if you're running from point A to point B. You've got to close the system off, make sure your water doesn't drain out. You have to recirculate for a period of time. Now, if you're going to make really long runs, then you've got to make sure that your recirculating aerator is running full time. The reason we want to run them full time is if you've got any poundage of fish in your live well, 10, 12, 15, 18, 20 pounds, whatever, those fish are going to use oxygen faster than your aeration system can put it back if your system is set on a timer to turn itself on and off. You've got to run it continuously. And when the water temperature gets above 75, that's where we start to get into much more critical range that anglers really need to pay attention to. In this case, now we're going to have to not only run our recirculating aerators continuously, we're going to close the system off so that we're not going to continuously during the day pump in warmer and warmer and warmer water. The water temperature first thing in the morning might be 75 or 78. By the middle of the afternoon, it might be 90. You don't want to be pumping in that 90-degree water during the day. You want to fill it up early with the cool water. Then our goal is to maintain a water temperature that's about 5 to 7 degrees below what the lake temperature was first thing in the morning. That's when we're going to put ice in the live well. And that 5 to 7 degrees is kind of a critical number. And that's where the floating thermometer comes in too. So you want to monitor that. And every boat live well is going to be a little different. You're going to have to kind of experiment with how much ice it's going to take to cool that live well down. And you're going to need to add ice potentially several times during the course of the day because you want to try to maintain a fairly constant environment for those fish. The aerator is running continuously, and you put enough ice in there to knock the temperature down about 5 degrees or so. And then over the course of the day, you may have to add ice periodically. Again, you use the thermometer, just check on them. We don't want to knock the temperature down any more than that, because even though it doesn't really hurt the fish to cool them off more, it hurts them when you warm them back up. So if you put ice in your live well and you knock the temperature down 15 degrees, they just kind of tense up and they'll sit at the bottom of the tank. It slows their metabolism way down. It kind of slows the recovery process down a little bit. But the real kicker is at the end of the weigh-in, when we turn those fish loose and put them back into that 80-something degree water, now you've jacked the temperature their body's exposed to way up. And that's what messes them up. They can cool down, but they physiologically, there's enzyme systems and things that get messed up that they can't take that rapid increase in temperature. Now, they may swim off, but they are likely going to be dead 3 to 5 days later. And so that's why we caution to not use too much ice, just enough to knock it down 5 to 7 degrees. 10 would be an absolute maximum. And again, that may take some experimentation. I know in my boat, it takes about 8 pounds of ice, which, a bag, a small bag of ice will last about 2 hours or so, 2.5 hours. You can freeze water in milk jugs, and if you don't want to use bagged ice or crushed ice, whatever, blocks like that will work too. And they tend to melt a little slower and give you a little bit more of a smooth, continuous temperature. When you use crushed ice, it knocks the temperature down very quickly, but then it tends to warm up a little bit faster. But that's kind of the key, is modest cooling and continuous aeration. And we can see at the end of the weigh-in, when fish come to the release boat, you can tell just by the color of the fish how lively they are, how they react to being handled when they've come out of a live well that has been treated properly and has been cooled properly. It can make a big difference. And, so in the grand scheme of things, ultimately, we've got fewer fish that succumb to delayed mortality.
And you all are doing the same thing. You're monitoring the behind the stage tanks for temperature and keeping them at a certain level, and as well as the live release boats.
Exactly. We, the environment that they come out of the live well, we want to try to mirror that with our weigh-in tanks. We keep them 5 to 7 degrees below the lake water temperature. And again, that's the temperature of the lake in the morning, not in the afternoon. I want to know what the temperature is in that early morning. That's more representative of what the lake, the environment is that those fish have come from. If you take the temperature of the surface water at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, sure, it's going to be a lot hotter, but that may not be representative of what the temperature is 5, 10, 20 feet down. First thing in the morning, it's a little more predictable. But we put ice in our tanks backstage. We put ice in the live wells, or in the tanks on the live release boat. And I will make a point too. People always ask a question about, well, what about all the chlorine in the ice? Texas Parks and Wildlife, one of their biologists a few years ago did a little study, and they looked at that. The amount of chlorine in crushed ice, bag ice, whatever, is insignificant. It's not hurting your fish. There's, if that's all you've got available, it's fine. Use that. If you want to freeze water in milk jugs or pop bottles or something like that, that's fine too. But the chlorine is really not an issue. The other thing that we used to recommend, and we are moving away from now, in the original Keeping Bass Alive protocols that we developed back in 2002, when we were closing our live wells off and recirculating, we put our ice in there. We were concerned with ammonia buildup, that's the waste product that fish produce. And at some point, ammonia builds up to a point of being toxic. And so we were afraid of those sort of things. So we said, halfway through the day, drain your live well, bring in fresh water, fill it back up. Maybe you drain out half of it, fill it back up, put more ice in there, restart the system. What we found in recent years is that you can probably continually recirculate the same water for an entire tournament day and not have to worry about pumping in warm water to make that exchange and then have to add a whole lot more ice to cool it back down. The toxicity of the ammonia is not a problem in a typical 8-hour tournament. So we're kind of moving away from that and saying it's okay to just keep the same water in there, recirculate, cool it down. There is a chemical now that is approved by the feds that you can put in your live well that will help remove that ammonia. And I say approved by the feds because all of the other commercial fish care chemicals that are on the market, none of them have got federal approval to be used on fish that are going to be released and potentially could be caught again and eaten by somebody. It doesn't mean they don't do good things or that they don't have good ingredients, but they've not gone through all of the rigorous testing that the Federal Food and Drug Administration requires to prove that if that fish gets eaten, that it's safe. So there is now a chemical on the market that I'm trying to, the name of it escapes me right now. I'll have to look it up, but it's in the new version of Keeping Bass Alive. When it goes up on our website here in the next month or so, there'll be a link to that chemical. But it's like you don't have to add it, but it's good if you want to, especially if you're in hot weather and you got a really big load of fish, like 20, 25 pounds, 30-pound bag, that sort of thing in your live well. When you got that kind of poundage of fish, there's a lot of waste products being generated, and in the hot weather, it's even a faster process. So this chemical will help neutralize that ammonia.
Is that ammonia? Is that when you see all the foaming on your top of your live well?
That's some of it. Yeah, the foam is actually is a result of proteins that are given off by the fish. A lot of times the slime on the outside of the fish, when they're really stressed, they'll slough off that slime. And as the aeration stirs things up, it creates the foam. if you're cooling your live well, that tends to reduce that loss of the mucus on the outside of the fish. And they tend to keep their slime coat better, and you generally don't have as much of a foam problem.
You said a typical 8-hour day, you're moving towards that's, the ammonia's, you can leave the live wells running. What if you're in a high school tournament like the one a couple weeks ago, and you have a late boat flight? So say you don't check in till 4:30 and you took off at 7. Now you've got a little bit longer day.
Right.
Does that affect that, or?
I think, I don't know I don't know that there's any kind of a study that I've seen that says, okay, you're good to 8 hours, and at 8:01 you've got to do something different. I think to be safe, if you had a significantly longer day than 8 hours, somewhere along there, 6, 7, 8 hours, it would be wise to probably drain out a little bit of that water and bring in some fresh water. Just remember to try to bring in water that's not right up on the shoreline where it's 95 degrees. But remember too that if you bring in fresh, warmer water, you're going to have ice ready to cool it back down so that your live well stays as constant as possible at that target temperature. And remember, we don't have a specific number that's a target. I can't tell you I want your live well at 85 degrees or 75 degrees or 65 degrees. It's 5 to 7 degrees below what the lake is first thing in the morning. So if your water temperature in the morning is 78, knock it down about 5 degrees from there. If it's 80, knock it down about 5 to 7 degrees from there. So that's where that floating thermometer comes in. Or you watch your surface temp on your sonar units. You can that's mounted on your trolling motor or on the back of your boat, however you've got a temperature gauge. Keep track of what that is early in the morning. That's your target, and go 5 to 7 degrees below that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, the other thing that depending on where you're fishing, you want to check your fish periodically. Don't just put them in the live well, put the ice in there, and forget about them. If the fishing's slow and you're not catching them, you may not have the need to go back there and open the lids of the live well. You need to check on them periodically and make sure they're doing okay. And if you see some that are showing signs of stress, make sure your aerator's running. Some of the boats have the recirculating aerator has a little tube that goes up to the side of the boat somewhere, and you can hear it sucking air in. Keep kind of listen for that, and periodically look back there and make sure that your pumps are running like they're supposed to be. I can't tell you how many times people have said, well, I just didn't check them, and then about 4 hours later I opened the lid and they're all dead. Well, the pumps quit running somewhere, but they didn't pay attention to that, and by the time they noticed it, it's too late, or those fish are so stressed out that they probably won't survive. So you just, as you get into warm weather, you just got to be more conscientious about keeping track of what these fish are doing and how they're reacting. You need to learn how to fizz your fish. If you're fishing from catching fish out of relatively deep water, 20 feet or more, especially in the summertime. There's two really good videos on bassmaster.com. If you go to the website and in the search thing, put in fizzing smallmouth or fizzing largemouth, and it will bring up two videos that show you the technique. The smallmouth one has a longer explanation of why it's important and why fizzing is something we recommend. But there again, you don't want to wait till the end of the day to do it. You need to keep track of what's going on in your live well. You put fish in there, check them after about 10 minutes. If you've got fish floating upside down, they're constantly trying to submerge and they float to the surface. You need to take care of them right then. Don't wait to the end of the day. Don't wait and just pass those fish off to the tournament staff, because by the time those fish get to the release boat, the damage to the fish's internal organs, to their heart, to their breathing, their health has been compromised, and there's a fairly poor chance that they're going to survive. You've got to learn to do it in the boat. You've got to get the fizzing needles and learn that technique. And that's one of those things that just, we can't stress enough that it can't wait. It needs to be done right away as soon as there's signs of barotrauma, which is that overinflated swim bladder.
Is there anything you recommend in addition to or besides fizzing? Weights, fin clips?
No. No, there's actually been a couple of studies done on fin clips. They don't cure anything. They help the fish stay upright, and instead of
In the live well.
floating on their sides, you clip the fins on, and they will struggle less. But it doesn't cure the overinflated swim bladder, which is causing the problem to begin with. And that overinflated swim bladder is putting pressure on all the other organs. It's actually potentially slowing down the fish's circulation and the heartbeat and the ability to get oxygen through their gills, because that swim bladder is so overexpanded. The fin clips don't fix that. All they do is hold the fish right side up. And again, that fish may not get you won't get a dead fish penalty, but chances are when that fish is released, it may swim away, but it has a pretty high chance of dying later because the damage has been done potentially for hours in the live well. So that's why we say, learn to fizz and learn to do it quickly in the process as soon as you recognize it. The fin clips kind of give you a false sense of accomplishment that you've cured something when in reality you haven't. So that's one of those things that people really need to be aware of. The other things that we recommend adding salt to the live wells when you're recirculating. A little bit of salt helps keep the water that the fish are in a little bit closer to what their blood chemistry is like. Like your blood, my blood is slightly saline. You go to the hospital, they plug you in with an IV that's saline. Fish's blood is kind of the same way. So if you put a little bit of salt in the live well when you're recirculating your water, the fish doesn't have to work as hard to maintain their internal blood chemistry. And so it helps them kind of get over some of this, the stress that they've been under from being caught, held in captivity and handled and all of that sort of thing. And it's, it's use non-iodized salt. You can buy it at the grocery store. And it's 1/3 of a cup to 5 gallons of water, or 1 cup to 15 gallons is the recipe. It's not a lot. Once you figured out the volume of your live well, you can put salt in keep it in a little Ziploc bag, pre-measured, if your live well holds 15 gallons, then you've got a little baggie with, a cup of salt in it. And you put that in your live well. And that's just, fish hatcheries, state and private hatcheries, people that haul fish for a living, always put salt in the water. And it's a therapeutic measure that's cheap and it's easy. And it's approved by the FDA and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So oxygen, salt, and ice. Those are the 3 things that are approved for use on fish that might become food. And so that's what we've recommended for years, is that kind of recipe. Lately, I see on the market, there are a couple of companies that make oxygen generating devices. Piranha is one of them. The other one's called Fish Lung, Lung. These are, as I described earlier, they're devices that take air and filter out the nitrogen and pump out oxygen into the water. They are, I think they're worth looking at. They're real pricey right now because they just don't sell a lot of them. So I think eventually when they really catch on, and they'll be, if you're a tournament angler and you're spending thousands of dollars on entry fees and stuff like that, then one of these devices, might help you in the long run, to keep you from having dead fish. They're not a cure-all. There's some of the advertising that makes it sound like all you got to do is pump plenty of oxygen in there. Remember that the temperature thing is still a big challenge. And to the fish, it's a challenge to the fish when you've got really hot water, even when you have high oxygen. And you can have too much oxygen too. If you're not careful, you can over oxygenate the water, either with a bottled oxygen system, the old way, in an air stone, or these new devices. So we're trying to work with those companies and try to figure out how they can kind of throttle those things down, so that you want to maintain saturation depending on how many pounds of fish are in the live well, but you don't want to over oxygenate them, because what happens when you put fish in an environment where there's too much oxygen, something triggers in their brain that says, wow, I got more oxygen than I know what to do with. I'm just going to stop breathing for a while. And that's not good.
No.
So that's kind of one of the challenges there. It's kind of, you can wind up with some gas bubble disease and some of that kind of stuff if they're in that environment for a long, long time. So, but I think those devices have some merit. They have some promise, especially as they get more widely adopted and the prices come down, that sort of thing. The little oxygen thing, they make a little round oxygen generating disc that mounts on the side of your live well. Some of the boats come with those, or they're maybe an option. They don't generate nearly as much oxygen as a bottled system or these new concentrators. They're a good supplement to an aeration system, but by themselves, they can't keep up with the oxygen demand. So that's another thing to keep in mind. You can't just flip a switch on those things and forget about it. You need a good aeration system to start with.
Is there a way or a product or something that you can get to help you see if there's enough oxygen in your live wells?
Not inexpensively. Unfortunately, the cheapest oxygen meter out there, they're well over $100, and they're not real reliable, and they're kind of a pain to maintain. And it's not something that you have mounted in your live well that you can just have a meter on your dash. That something that would do that is going to cost you thousands of dollars. Some sort of solid state meter. So unfortunately, not. But what we've seen is that most modern bass boats, and by modern I would say anything built since the late 90s, 2000s, that has a freshwater pump that runs through a spraying nozzle and a recirculating pump that sucks in air, through a venturi and aerates it, are pretty efficient in keeping your oxygen levels where they need to be until you get into that really hot weather and you have to recirculate continuously. That's another thing that adding ice tends to do is when you put ice in there, it slows the fish's metabolism down just a little. Plus, cooler water holds more oxygen, so you get the benefits of both. When you get into those really extreme conditions of high temperatures and really big loads of fish, that's where supplementing oxygen either through one of these concentrators or a bottled oxygen system is almost a necessity. Now, the folks that have done some work on that, my former colleague in Texas that has since retired worked on Sam Rayburn when he was doing a lot of this research, and where they're catching 30, 35, 40-pound bags of bass. So when you've got that kind of load in your live well, even a modern bass boat live well system is going to have a hard time keeping up. That's where the oxygen bottle or the oxygen concentrator system is really the best option you have. For our neck of the woods, where 20 pounds is a big load, they'd be nice to have if you can afford them, or if you want to go to now you can build a bottled oxygen system. The one I have in my boat, the regulator was about $100, and the oxygen bottle that it attaches to is about the size of a boat fire extinguisher. It's a little small bottle, and it'll last a 2-day tournament. And so the whole system was probably less than $150. And then you put a good air stone in there that makes tiny little bubbles, and it works fine.
Will that be in the new book?
Yeah, I think they're actually in the Keeping Bass Alive that's on the website now. Might actually talk a little bit about that system, but yeah, we've got the new KBA, we call it, Keeping Bass Alive. We'll have a link to uh, design criteria and equipment and that sort of thing. So it's a little less expensive way to oxygenate a live well. You know, the guys down in South Texas are using them quite a bit. I see more and more of them being used in smallmouth tournaments up north where they're catching, 25-pound bags of smallmouth. And up there, it's even, to me, it's even more critical because we know that smallmouth tend to use more oxygen per pound of fish than largemouth do. They're just, their metabolism is revved up. They're more high strung, if you want to call it that. And keeping them healthy at a weigh-in or in your live well is more challenging because of just the nature of the fish.
Mhm.
So that's something to keep in mind. Guys fishing at 10 killer or places where smallmouth are more common in our neck of the woods. That's really something they need to be conscious of, is that they are a little bit more sensitive to that, to temperature and oxygen both.
Have you had any dealings with like any boat manufacturers that have put a chiller, like the Icon has a chiller live well?
There you are. You can go way back. Charger boats, when they were still in business, back 20 years ago, had a chiller built as an option that you could put in on a Charger boat. The cooler that was between the driver and passenger seat had a copper coil in it, and you filled the cooler space full of ice, and it had a little pump that pumped live well water out of the live well through that copper coil, cooled the water down, and then it ran it right back into the live well to help maintain whatever the temperature was. Didn't have anything like a thermostat or anything on it. And the problem with that system was that it took forever to cool the water down in your live well if you didn't add ice to the live well to start with. If you cooled it down with ice in the water, in the live well water, then this cooling system built into the boat seat would help maintain that temperature. Nitro used the same system for a while as an option in one of their boats, or some of their boats. There's I believe behind the driver's seat there was a compartment there that had a coil in it and a pumping system. I don't think it caught on very well because most of the anglers didn't want to give up that storage space.
Mm.
They wanted to put more tackle in there, and so I don't even know if it's still an option anymore. Icon took a different approach. Their live well has a plate in it, a metal plate that's a thermoelectric thing that there actually has. It's like a refrigeration unit. It has a compressor that runs a coolant through there. The downside to that system, though, is that compressor uses a lot of power, and it's almost like you have to have a separate battery just to keep up with it, because it will help maintain temperature. But if you start out with, say, 80-degree water and you want to knock it down to say 73 or 4 or something like that, it takes a long time to drop 40 gallons of water that 5 to 7 degrees. Unless you put ice in there to start with, then the system can kind of keep up. So that's something that people need to be aware of, is that those systems, just the nature of cooling water, it takes a lot of energy to cool that water down, and ice is the quickest, easiest way, cheapest way by far to do that.
All right. Well, now let's get into the nitty gritty. So, and you, before you worked for Bass, you were what? You're biologist here
Yes,
in Oklahoma.
right.
Did a lot of fish studies and stuff like that here in this state. So, as I said, we had the high school tournament here a couple weeks ago, and you know, as with just about every tournament, there's a few floaters around,
Oh yeah.
and it became kind of a pretty good ruckus between the tournament anglers and people that uh, would just assume there's not any tournaments.
Yeah, right.
What do you say to somebody that says, you know, they saw some dead fish and that there shouldn't be any tournaments in July or in June or whatever, and that or any time that water temperature gets warm weather, and there shouldn't be any tournaments. Period. It's killing the fishery.
Right. For decades, we used to always tell people that the numbers of bass that die as a result of bass tournaments really had little impact on the overall population of bass in a lake. The studies that have been done that show the total mortality of tournament related bass compared to the number of fish that die from people taking them home to eat them or that just die of natural causes, that the tournament mortality was not excessive and was not impacting the overall numbers of bass in that lake, that they were replaced fairly quickly by fish that were already out there that just grew up and kind of filled that void. Now, there's recently been a study done in Alabama on Neely Henry Lake where they have a tournament just about every night of the week, maybe close to all year long. It's a much smaller lake than Grand Lake, very much smaller, but it has a tremendous amount of fishing pressure and tournament pressure. And what they found was that the total numbers of bass weren't really changing all that much, but the numbers of larger bass were being impacted. Now, tournaments don't fish for the little ones. We fish for the larger fish, and we know that larger bass tend to die at a slightly higher rate than smaller bass do. And so what I've always kind of likened this to is, you know, the fish population, if you think of it as a pyramid, there's lots and lots of fish at the bottom of the pyramid. And as you go up higher and higher towards those bigger and bigger and bigger fish, they're more rare. And there's not as many of them. But what some of the situations like at Neely Henry, where you have huge amount of tournament pressure on a small body of water, you're kind of cropping off the top of that pyramid. The overall numbers really haven't changed much. But you just don't have the big fish, the larger fish in the numbers that you might have if you didn't have that much tournament pressure. And this is on lakes that I would say maybe even the majority of the fishing pressure is tournament pressure and not as much, you know, just recreational angling. Big lakes like Grand, study done at Sam Rayburn, other places around the country, they haven't seen that sort of thing. In fact, in Alabama, they wanted to put some special regulations on these Coosa River lakes, the smaller bodies of water, to sort of throttle back some of that mortality of those larger fish. But they're not worried about, say, Gunnersville or Smith Lake or Eufaula. Those big lakes can absorb that kind of pressure more easily, and you don't see the impacts that you might on a smaller body of water. So to your question, John, in terms of Grand Lake, it's more of a social issue than a biological one. Dead fish floating around the lake or washed up by the boat ramp are a bad image, and it gives people the impression that tournaments are killing all the bass. When there's an article on bassmaster.com that was written by the fish chief in Arkansas several years ago, and he said the numbers of bass that die as a result of tournaments are what he called decimal dust. It's such a tiny, tiny percentage of the total numbers of bass in the lake that die as a result of bass tournaments that it's insignificant in terms of the future of that population and how healthy it is. Obviously, smaller bodies of water with high fishing pressure, high tournament pressure, especially when you have tournaments all year long in the heat of the summer, we know that, like I said earlier, it's directly related to water temperature. You know, when we did our tournament mortality studies back in the 90s, in the February, March, April tournaments, we might have 0 to 5% delayed mortality. In the July and August tournaments that we worked with, 40, 50% mortality was not uncommon. So we tried to encourage tournaments to not have tournaments in the heat of the summer. And a lot of the organizations did. You look at a lot of the major tournament circuits now, they're done by June.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they try to avoid those hot summertime tournaments because when fish kills happen, there is this knee-jerk reaction and political pressure and the push by, like you said, the people that would just assume the tournaments go away to ban or regulate tournaments somehow. And I'll give you a perfect example from Grand Lake. In 1996, I believe it was, there was a big outfit had a tournament there in July, and it was like 105 degrees. But boy, they caught them. The lake was up in the bushes. People were flipping in the willows back when there were lots and lots of willows. And it was 20-pound bag of 20, and just crazy numbers of fish. The live release boat that they had, the operator kind of panicked. They wound up, I think they had more fish than water in their live release boat. I mean, it was that crazy kind of a catch. And they went out and they dumped a bunch of fish out in Echo Bay. That's back when everybody went out of Martin Landing. And the next day, looks like popcorn out there all over the bay with dead fish. And boy, the phone started ringing, and GRDA went out there and scooped up 500 dead bass and laid them out on the parking lot and took pictures of them. And that afternoon, CNN has a helicopter flying over Grand Lake looking at all the dead fish. The next day, I got a call from the governor's office that said, we got to do something about these tournaments. There's people at Grand Lake that are very connected politically. And we had to work really hard to keep GRDA from shutting down bass tournaments entirely. But we came to some resolution and moved on. But it can become that sort of volatile situation that can lead to bad things. And so our whole goal with the Keeping Bass Alive protocols and everything that we've done over the years is to educate anglers so that the states don't have to regulate anglers. And that to me is the whole key. If we can keep fish alive through education, then the state doesn't have to step in, or the lake authority, whoever it is, doesn't have to step in and try to regulate things. And we can keep the sport going into the future. I personally wish we could figure out a way to move these high school and college tournaments out of the summertime. The necessity of doing that with, based on the, when the kids are out of school and that sort of thing, it's a tough, it's a balancing act. And, back to your very first question is, what are we going to do at this college championship this week in the hot summertime? Our high school tournament, our high school national championship is a couple of weeks away. So it's, BASS is as guilty as anybody, and I'll say it, of not trying to get these tournaments off of the hot summertime. And some of that's just the nature of the business and the locations where we want to have these tournaments. These host communities would rather have us here in the summertime. It's good for their business. It's good for tourism, that sort of thing. So it's a real balancing act. And I think, again, educating the anglers, making sure they're doing everything right, making sure the tournament staff is doing everything right, reducing the option or the opportunities for fish to die, making sure that delayed mortality, those floaters don't come up in the next week. And if we can minimize that, then in the grand scheme of things, I think we're okay.
Yeah. I mean, I can speak a little bit to the World Tournament that was here a couple weeks ago. They had 25 tanks, from the stage out. The lake was high, so
right.
They couldn't park at the dock and bring their fish to the stage. So you had boats that were beaching, that put in elsewhere and that were beaching, in the parking lot. Basically, they were beaching in the parking lot, and golf carts I was running a golf cart because they were short, and they needed a couple extra golf carts. And so I was helping run anglers from the boats to the tanks. And They had 25 tanks lined up. The tanks never got full, ever. We'd run the teams that beached up there on a golf cart in a bag of water, and we had them from their boat to the tank in a matter of less than a minute. And then the other boats that were pulling out would, their boat captain would drop them off right there at the tank. So they'd pull out of the water and get right in line. So they got them through pretty quick, and they had 2 live release boats that they were rotating in and out, and And I think they had an ice truck right there by the tanks. They were watching all that, and I think they did a pretty good job. I can't speak to every team, that what they did during the day to take care of the fish.
Yeah. Yeah. You can have all the first aid possible at the weigh-in and do everything right. Like, it sounds like they did it right. But if the anglers aren't taking care of the fish for the 5, 6, 7, 8 hours, however long those fish are in their live well, then all that first aid at the weigh-in doesn't fix things. You got to have both. I mean, you got to have a good weigh-in and a good system, but the anglers have to realize that a big part of it is their responsibility. And for decades now, it's getting anglers to understand the concept of delayed mortality is very, very hard, because they see their fish swim away and they assume they've done everything right, when they don't realize that those fish may die 2 or 3 or 5 days later. And it's out of sight, out of mind. And the floaters come up days later and wash up on the shoreline, or worse, on the shoreline of some millionaire's beach house, lake house, and he calls the governor. That's the kind of thing that the tournament anglers don't see, that because they're gone.
Yeah.
But they've got to understand that what they do during the day is as or more critical than what the weigh-in is. A lot of organizations, bigger tournament trails and stuff, I think by and large have pretty good weigh-in processes. Now, the little Wednesday night jackpots and the smaller clubs where you see people dragging their fish up in a bag of water and sitting it on the hot asphalt for 5 minutes waiting to weigh in. Those are not good.
Yeah.
We know those are a problem. And there's a lot of those little tournaments going on. And unfortunately, sometimes when a big organization comes to town, but there's also some of these weekly jackpot type tournaments that aren't doing things right, kill some fish, the big organization gets blamed for it because they're the ones everybody sees.
Yeah.
But they, going through the whole process, we've got to educate tournament directors and the anglers. So we got a complete package.
Yeah, and like you said, it is a social. I agree that it's a social issue because, I mean, frankly, I haven't seen that. Like, I didn't see any pictures of 500 fish floating around. I saw one here, one there, type of thing. The ruckus came when somebody posted and said something about tournaments, are killing this lake, and then of course all the tournament anglers from the area jump on, and it doesn't help that first words out of your mouth is we could eat them all.
Right.
Yeah.
That doesn't help things. That just fuels the fire.
That's a pretty weak argument. Yeah, it sure is.
Yeah. So, and we all, and the ones that we're posting, I am sure that they take care of their fish. Like most of the guys on there that were arguing for tournaments work their tails off to take care of their fish. They, most of them win a lot of money on this lake, so it doesn't do them any good to kill the fish. It just, you have to be careful about how you respond, and
it's I don't know. I have encouraged state agencies over the years to try to get together with all of their tournament organizations and have some sort of powwow with all of the tournament directors, and really talk about some of these issues and make sure that they all understand how important it is to do things right and make sure they have the knowledge necessary, and so that the tournament directors then can pass that on then to the anglers that fish their tournaments, their club or their circuits or trails, whatever. Again, back to that, education kind of a concept, so the state doesn't have to step in and come down on tournaments and limit things, because I've always thought that tournament fishing is a legitimate activity. Everybody buys a fishing license. They're contributing to the support of the agency, and they, the whole idea of, well, X number of bass die as a result of tournaments. Well, think back 40 or 50 years ago, every one of those fish would have gone to a fish fry. And so the tournament organizations are trying voluntarily, in most cases, to turn back as many fish as possible to recycle them so they can be caught again. And so I think it's, in some cases, it's kind of unfair to punish tournaments for trying to do something for the good of the resource. It's just, again, it kind of goes back to those social issues and the optics of dead fish being so negative that people jump all over the tournaments and say, we got to do something to cut back on this.
Yeah.
And the general public, they don't understand how in most cases, how little impact the tournaments really have on a bass population. And, if the fishing's good or bad or whatever from year to year, there's a lot of other factors that go into that way beyond what the tournaments are doing. Weather and year class strength and good spawns and recruitment and water levels and all sorts of things, habitat that impact that more than tournament activity. So where are we now?
Well, I think John and I were both reading some comments and trying to figure out how to ask.
Oh, okay.
I'll just go ahead and jump on it, Gene. Richard Heflin asks, do all states have tournament requirements? Like in Kansas, there's only like 4 bags allowed at a tank at a time. It has to be covered, a sunshade of some sort. Only X amount of bags are allowed out at a time. And he's asking, are states similar in that, or do they vary quite a bit?
It varies tremendously. There are a lot of states that have 0 regulations. There are states that don't have any sort of registration. They don't know how many tournaments they've got in their state. They just, it's, I don't say the Wild West, but they don't, the state agency, the Fish and Wildlife Management Agency, doesn't do anything in terms of regulating tournaments. There are others that go much, I'd say almost to the other extreme with permitting and a lot of requirements that tournaments have to follow. Most cases, those are hot weather requirements. And because we know that the hot weather is when we have the real problems. So it varies, from state to state. There are places that have permit systems, but they have some sort of exemptions for tournaments that if to allow a tournament to use something other than whatever the state length limit is. Like in Oklahoma, you can keep 6 bass a day, but only 1 over 16 inches. Unless you're in a registered tournament, then you can put 5 bass of whatever size in your live well, with the agreement that the tournament is going to try to turn loose all of those fish at the end of the day. That there are a number of states that have something similar to that. Maybe the numbers are a little different here and there, but as far as specifics, like you're talking about in Kansas with tanks and bags and those sort of things, that's a little more rare, that there's that much detail in the permits. Although, like I said, it's becoming a little more common in summertime tournaments around and I think especially northern states, bass fishing has never really been regulated much. It's just sort of been on autopilot, and a lot of those states up north are realizing that bass fishing and bass tournaments is a pretty big deal, and they need to kind of keep tabs on it. Make sure that things are going the way they need to go, and that there's not abuse. And so some of those states are starting to institute other kinds of restrictions or requirements, I guess you'd call it. Maybe not restrictions, they're just more requirements that, and some of those things are scaled. If you've got 100 boat tournaments, you have to have this. If you've got a 10, 15 boat tournament, you only have to have, something less. So that kind of systems are a little more common.
Cool.
Gene, I did have one question on your system you use on your boat. You said you use an oxygen tank.
Mm-hmm.
How do you go about refilling that? Do you take it somewhere? Or do you have to buy a whole new tank? How does that work?
You can take it to the welding shop and they'll fill it back up.
Okay.
Now it's like any oxygen tank. It has to be, I don't know what they call it, certified, or they have to check periodically.
Sure.
To make sure that it's holds pressure. But in a roundabout way, they also make a little thing called a transfill tube, which is a braided airline that you can hook up to a welding size oxygen bottle, and then hook it up to this little bitty bottle that I've got, and I can fill it myself from a full size welding bottle. It's probably not the safest way to do it, but it's.
I was gonna say, is that safe? I'd blow myself up probably.
You can. I got it off of eBay or Amazon or somewhere. I can't remember where I bought it. But in a pinch, if I'm somewhere and I don't have access to a welding shop, I can, if I find somebody that's got an oxygen bottle, I can. And this little bottle that I've got, literally, it's a little taller, a little longer than a fire extinguisher out of your boat, but not much. It's not very big, and so it doesn't take much to fill it up, but it's plenty to last a weekend. And if you get a little bit bigger bottle, there's some of them you can, there's all different sizes you can buy, and you hook up this little regulator to it. The real key in homemade system, and even with these the oxygen generators, is the air stones. That's not really an air stone, it's an oxygen diffuser. And what it does is it puts out tiny little, almost like micro bubbles, that when you turn it on, it looks like a cloud coming up off of the air stone. You can't hardly even tell that it's bubbles because the bubbles are so tiny, and that way they dissolve into the water very, very quickly. If you put a regular, just a, you can buy these things that are like a what do you call it, a little bubbler thing that runs a couple of batteries and this little air stone that you drop into your live well. It puts out great big bubbles. Well, the bubbles float to the surface before the oxygen has time to dissolve into the water. And even then, it's only 21% oxygen because it's just air. And so that's a real plus for using some sort of oxygen generator. These concentrators or out of a bottle is that you're using pure oxygen.
Very interesting.
Before we get too far away from and you may have answered and I wasn't paying attention, which would not surprise me at all. Before we get too far away from the social issue, I mean, how should tournament anglers respond when they're dealing with somebody that's saying tournament angling is going to ruin Grand Lake?
I guess the thing that people that I've talked to when it comes to trying to respond to things on social media is you put out facts. You don't put out opinions. You stay away from emotion. Find some studies or citations on the internet somewhere and say, hey, look, we're doing the best we can. We're trying to release all the fish we can. And here's a couple of studies that show that tournament mortality is not as detrimental to bass populations as most people think it is. And put a couple of links out there to studies that back up your opinion. And because if you get into an argument with somebody, you can never win because the other person can always come back with the last word.
Mm-hmm.
And so you don't get anywhere, trying to argue with somebody on Facebook or Instagram or wherever. You need to be polite and try to explain that we're doing the best we can. We're trying to educate our anglers, and based on the studies that have been done, for the most part, there are exceptions. There are places where it's where we have some issues, but for the most part, it is more of a social issue than a biological one. And try to make that.
I mean, here at Grand, all you hear is from the anglers that fish. Even, all the high schoolers that were here, all week fishing from Georgia and from South Carolina and Tennessee that were here and Kansas. They all talk about how great the fishing is, how there's just a ton of 4 to 6 pound fish in this lake, and they can't believe it. None of their lakes have this many big fish in it, back home, and it's just different. And it's I just don't think it's true.
Well, it's again, I don't know what the latest numbers are, but this study that came out of Alabama, I think is going to open a lot of eyes on, for other state agencies to maybe look into this big fish, or the decline in numbers of larger bass. I have always wondered about Grand Lake, why it does not produce more 8, 9, 10 pound bass.
Right.
And is it because there's 150 tournaments a year there? You know, we know, I mean, you go up there in the fall and you go back into those coves and you can walk on the shad. It's not a forage issue.
Yeah.
You know, the production of bass as far as recruitment and spawning and all that kind of stuff has always been good. And it does produce. And you know, a lot of the pros I've always heard the thing that says Grand Lake is probably the best non-grass lake in the country.
Mm-hmm.
As far as you know, a production of quality fish for a lake that doesn't have any aquatic plants in it, that kind of habitat. But I've always kind of wondered, well, is it just a genetic thing? Why don't we have more, you know, 7, 8, 9, 10 pound bass out of there?
Yeah.
And, you know, is it related to the fact that there's been 150 tournaments a year for forever, as long as I can remember?
Yeah.
And certainly with the, you know, careful what you ask for. When Grove when we built the Wolf Creek boat ramp, it attracts a lot of big tournaments, and it's all year long now. So
thank God.
Good.
We need more big tournaments, as far as I'm concerned.
Anyway.
So let's change gears just a little bit. Still talking about Grand.
Okay.
But they just released 93,000 F1 bass.
Oh yeah.
So my question is 93,000 a significant number? I mean, to me, that really doesn't seem like that many. When you're talking about, you know, a fish, when they spawn, how many fish does one bass?
Okay.
How many eggs does one bass lay, I guess?
Yeah. Tens of thousands.
Yeah.
Okay. First, we gotta set the stage here. The F1 stocking program. This is what, second, third year?
I think so. Yep.
How many years it's been going on?
I think 2, maybe.
The goal of stocking F1s is not to put more bass in the lake. It's the hope that some of those fish will survive and grow up to be trophies. Period. It's not to increase numbers of fish.
Okay.
It is strictly an idea of we're going to try to put a fish in there that, since it's half Florida, half largemouth, it has the potential of growing to be a trophy size fish, a 8 pound or better fish, which has been lacking in Grand forever. The 93,000, the number, we know that a huge percentage of those fish won't make it. They get eaten by something else. So it's kind of a numbers game. When any state stocks bass, it's a trade-off. If you know you're going to have significant mortality of those little fish, those little fingerlings, you try to put a lot of them out there. The challenge with these F1s is that they are store-bought fish. There are only a couple of companies in the country that produce these F1 hybrid bass, and they are very expensive. They're like $1 a piece. And so at some point it becomes economics. Yes, it would be great if they could stock 1 million.
Yeah.
But nobody could afford that. Even, the donations and stuff just wouldn't be there. So when that program started, they said, well, we're going to try to get donations and use state money and whatever. And what's a number that we think we can target every year to be able to do this for 4 or 5 years, and then they'll monitor that. And then, keep in mind, this is a long-term experiment. It takes, on average, in Oklahoma, 10 years to grow a 10-pound bass. So it will take a while before they will know whether or not these F1s, significant numbers of them, are surviving and growing to the sizes that you want to see. Other states that have been doing this a little bit longer, like in North Carolina and Virginia in particular, they're at that 10-year kind of mark, and certainly in Virginia they are. And they're starting to see more trophy bass in some of the lakes there that they put F1s in. Again, they're not seeing more bass overall. They're electroshock surveys and that sort of thing. They don't see increases in the overall numbers of bass, but they do see more of the big fish. And they're showing up in tournaments now too. And through genetic testing, they can tell whether or not that was one of the stocked F1s from 5 years ago, 7 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever, compared to the native bass. Because since Grand Lake, in your case, Grand Lake has very, very, very low percentage of Florida bass genes in the system, those F1s, when they do the genetic testing on them, they're pretty easy to identify. They can take a little fin clip, a little tiny piece of the fin, about the size of your little fingernail, and they can tell you if that is one of those stocked fish. You get a 7-pounder, they can tell you through their genetic testing whether it was one that was stocked or if that's a native bass. But it's a long-term experiment, and it is very early on in the process.
So how long are they thinking? Are they guessing an F1? Is it an F1 that takes 10 years to grow, or a native bass that takes 10 years to grow to 10 pounds?
In general, when we did all of our genetic work way back, this is like in the, I started with I got our Florida bass program ramped up in Oklahoma in the mid 80s. And a lot of what we looked at were trophy fish. We went around to taxidermists back when people mounted fish, and we got samples from fish, and we found that if it was over 8 pounds, there was a pretty good chance that it was a fish that had Florida genes in it, in one of the lakes that the state had been stocking Florida bass in. It was either a pure Florida or some kind of a hybrid. The native northern strain, or what the largemouth bass, very seldom got over 8 pounds. So a 10-pounder had a really high chance of being some degree of Florida bass. The F1s, like any hybrid, whether it's corn or cattle or anything else, a lot of times they show increased growth rates, and so they potentially could grow to trophy size a little faster, certainly than the native bass would. What we don't know is, as far north as Grand is, will the climate allow that genetic potential to show up? The growing season, you go to, let's go to Lake Fork, or let's go to Sam Rayburn. The growing season in Texas is much, much longer than it is at Grand Lake. And so fish have many more weeks of potential growth because of the climate. So stocking the F1s at Grand Lake, again, as an experiment, the genetics are there, but we don't know at this point whether the environment will allow those genetics to be expressed in terms of producing trophy-sized fish. It's all an experiment, and that's, we tried stocking pure Florida bass all over Oklahoma back in the 70s and 80s, and we found that pretty much everything, if you draw a kind of a diagonal line across the state about where I-44 runs from Tulsa to Oklahoma City down to the southwest, anything north of that line, the Florida bass genes just disappeared in a matter of just a few years. The Florida bass were just not adapted to that kind of climate, the cold weather, especially in the wintertime. The F1s, you've got half Florida, half largemouth. In theory, they should be more tolerant of cold weather, but still have the growth potential of the Florida bass. So in theory, it could be a fish that would live in Grand Lake, survive in Grand Lake, and grow up to be trophy bass in Grand Lake. Now, the other catch is, as soon as that fish matures and tries to spawn, chances are it's going to find another native bass to spawn with, because there's a whole lot more of them out there than there are F1s. Now you're going to start diluting the Florida genes with every successive generation, and you're potentially going to lose that trophy potential. So you almost have to continually stock these F1s. If this works, if it starts producing trophy fish, then at some point you're kind of on the hook to potentially have to stock these fish, every year or two or three, however much you can afford.
Yeah.
So it's a long-term kind of a gamble, and it's starting to pay off a little bit in a couple of other states that have been doing it longer. So we'll see where it goes at Grand.
Very good. One more question from Mr. Moody. I guess he's talking about, he said, are there dissolvable tablets available? Is he talking about oxygen, some kind of oxygen tablets?
Yeah, there are oxygen tabs. They sell them at pet stores. You can put them in your aquarium. But there's a company that has started making them, and they're kind of pushing them as a tournament remedy, that when you put these things in your live well, they start fizzing and they release oxygen. There again, the chemicals in those tablets are not anything that's been approved by the FDA, because it potentially could release chemicals that the fish ingests or absorbs that may or may not be harmful if people were to eat that fish. We don't know. Like I say, I can't say that they're bad for, in terms of I don't know enough about them as far as whether they put out enough oxygen to really do what you want them to do. But we're not going to recommend them. We, being bass, state fish and wildlife agencies, are not going to recommend any of these chemicals, additives, because they don't have that FDA approval.
Right. Very good. Gene, we've had you almost 2 hours. It seemed like you just came on. Does it not? Does it not seem like Gene just came on? He's been sitting outside Buc-ee's this whole time. I feel bad. You could have went in and got a barbecue beef sandwich.
A brisket sandwich and a sweet tea. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're not even to your destination yet, I don't think.
No, I'm about halfway to Dandridge, I guess. So
We better let Mr. Gene go. We appreciate you coming on, and we haven't been able to see you since about a half an hour into the show.
No.
I don't know what's going on, but we've heard you fine. So
Okay. Well, because the little image on my end, it shows up, so I don't know what's going on.
yeah, not sure what's going on either, but we're gonna let you go and get to the college championship and wish you well there, and hope everybody catches a lot of fish and you don't have any live well issues.
Well, we're going to try to educate them tomorrow, and hopefully everything will come out on the positive side.
When did you say this new Keeping Bass Alive booklet will be on the website?
I've got the text finished, and I've got to get it to one of our graphic design people, April, to polish it up and make it look pretty. And I've still got one of the things I've got to do this week is take a few more photographs to go with it. And ultimately, what I hope to do is replace some of the photographs with little short video clips. And I'm trying to work with our JM Associates video guys to maybe at our next elite tournament or two to get some little video clips to illustrate some of the protocols that we recommend, so that it's not just a photograph, it's a little more descriptive with a video description.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yep.
Again, Gene, we appreciate you coming on, and I'm sure we'll have you on again sometime. And
Anytime, Gene.
Yep.
Anytime.
Yep.
Glad to have you.
Well, guys, I appreciate the opportunity, and hopefully people learn some things. And they can go right now to bassmaster.com, and in the search box just put Keeping Bass Alive, and it'll take you right to the current edition of our recommendations, and give them some ideas on what they need to be doing to keep their fish healthy.
Sounds good, Gene.
Awesome.
Go get you a brisket sandwich. And
All right, I will sign off, and again, thanks for having me on.
You bet. See you later.
Thanks,
Later.
Gene. Awesome.
I mean, I wasn't kidding. I mean, he's been on 2 hours, and it seemed like he just got on a minute ago.
Yeah, it's true.
I mean, I think we asked 2 questions.
Yeah.
When Gene's on, it was like Rick Clunn the other night. I wanted to stop him and tell him, hey, we can't see you. But then I'm like, why?
He's on a roll.
He's on a roll. Let him go. Oh, man. I learn something from him every time I listen to him speak, either in person or on this show or anywhere else.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a good dude. And he's not, you know, for people that, and I'm hoping that people watch this show that didn't watch tonight, from around here, can learn a little bit about tournament fishing, and I hope that they take what he says, um, not with a grain of salt, because he's an expert at it, and he's not a bass master. Like you heard him say, they're as guilty as anybody of having tournaments in the middle of the summer.
Mhm.
So he knows that's not the best time to have a tournament, especially a big tournament. Like that, especially one where high schoolers and college kids and I'd never really thought about, from the north, have never seen 80-degree water or 90-degree water.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So
I didn't even consider that
they
when
don't know how to handle that. So, uh, you know, I just don't want them to think, well, he works for Bass. Of course he's going to say that. No, he's going to tell it how it is. We probably shouldn't run tournaments in the heat of summer. And if we do run them, they need to be shorter, like the ones I run. I mean, I've got one next week here on Grand, but it's going to be 6 a.m. to like 1, shortened tournament, 3 fish limit instead of 5. I put out 5 bags, so there's not a line. They get their fish out of the boat, and by the time they get it up there, I'm ready to weigh them. So
Yeah,
it's not that difficult for tournament organizations, even little ones, to do little things like that. You don't have to put out 20 bags for a 20 boat tournament.
right.
I put out 5, and I have a 20 boat tournament, and every one of them 20 is going to catch fish because they're all sticks on this lake. Weigh-ins at 3. We're done, and handed out the money by 3:30. Just
Um,
by doing a couple little things, like not putting out very many bags, having your scales right next to the water, little bitty things,
simple things.
simple things. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There was one thing that I really wanted to jump in with, and I thought, well, we'll do it another time, because we had talked earlier, the last time Gene was on, talked about coming back this fall after the Elite Series to see, how the experiment went with that piranha system.
Yeah.
Um, but Justin Harris commented a while ago about guys should have to go through a class or some kind of certification. And I'm assuming he meant to be tournament director.
Yeah.
I always thought, when I was in that line, I always thought, when Gene does the conservation summit, like at every other classic, I think it is. It's not every year, but it's like every other year. I always thought that the state tournament directors should be invited to that. I mean, yes, it is conservation, and you should
Mhm.
work with conservation, but at the same time, there are 2 offices, anybody's state,
Yeah.
that are working directly with the resource, and that's the conservation director and the tournament director. And I always thought they should have a conference for tournament directors, but
Yeah. Not a bad idea. And that is true, Mark Moody. I do have good help, and that helps that helps run a smooth tournament and get it done quickly is when you do have help. I know some tournament directors don't get any help or very little.
Another thing I thought of too was I know Gene is working on the new updated version of that, but I wonder if there would be a way that they could condense like, specific techniques like fizzing or the ice, protocols that he has into like a small, like individual, like if I need to look up how much ice I need to put in or what degrees I need to drop or how I need to fizz a fish real quick. Some way to have a resource where I can pull up just that specific thing I'm looking for.
They used to have I don't know if it's digital, but they used to have a business card style.
Yeah, something like that even.
They used to have those, and I don't think I have one, but
You can just have like a little flashcard book in your boat on like
put it in your wallet. Put it in your wallet, man, and I think it had that stuff on it. The 1 cup of ice to 15 gallons.
And that could be something they
5 to
could
7
give,
degrees lower. Yeah.
They could give that to the tournament directors or conservation directors for each state and say, here, pass these out at your annual meetings to your clubs, then filter this information out further.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure what was on that card, but they did have a business card, little plastic card at one time.
Definitely needs to be waterproof.
Yeah. 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 That's a good show.
That's great.
Buc-ee's.
He went to Buc-ee's.
Buc-ee's made an appearance on the show. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, true. I mean,
as much as it gets talked about
all the time, but we've never had anyone actually
live from Buc-ee's.
That's awesome.
That's it. I have to get him a super guest robe.
Yeah, a Buc-ee's robe.
Ooh. Nice.
Surely they got them.
They definitely have them.
Surely they got them.
Well, if they don't, they gonna. Oh my goodness.
A good show.
Absolutely.
Good show. I'm efforting a couple other people, so we'll see. They come on next week. I don't have any confirmations, but we can continue soliciting fish memories, your favorite fish memory.
Yes.
If we don't, we were going to do it tonight, and we didn't get. We got Gene instead, which is probably better, but maybe not.
I don't know.
But we got some pretty good fish stories, I think.
Yeah. Send them in.
Yeah. Where do they send them?
I will post that. Let me see if I have. I should still have that file here.
You guys, if you want to make
Here
a video or whatever,
there.
Yeah, you can send it to Crank. You can send it to any of us, and we'll send it to Crank. So, email. You can message it through, Facebook Messenger, text, whatever, and we'll get it there.
Yep. That's the easiest thing.
30 seconds to 1 minute.
It'll end up being 2 to 5.
And yes,
and that's okay.
You guys think, man, I can't think of anything to say for 30 seconds to a minute. Yes, you can.
Yeah, you can.
It's too hard to go 30 seconds to a minute. It is way more hard to do 30 seconds than it is to do 5 minutes.
Yep.
Yeah.
When you're talking about something that you're passionate about and that you have that emotional connection with that you remember, yeah, it's easy to talk for 5 minutes about something.
Yep.
You're not going to upset me if you play it since you have it queued up.
You want to play it?
Sure.
All right, let's do it.
Everybody, out in the garage, and the memories just come back when I come out here in my dad's shop. There's a lot of things that come to mind, and I was digging in the corner and found one of his old flathead lines, 5/16 nylon braid. That swivel for the staging is like off of like a dog lead, or a tie out cord for a dog or another critter. £600 nylon braid, doubled for the staging. 8/0 stainless O'Shaughnessy short shank. Never bent, never twisted off, and I'll never forget.
Very nice.
Very cool.
So anytime I show that trot line to people, it's how long? I say it's 250 feet long. Well, that's illegal as hell. No, it isn't. It only has 25 hooks on it.
Yeah. Do you have any pictures of fish that he caught on the trot line?
I will dig some up.
That would be cool to see.
That would.
Cranker edited that a little bit, trying to make it shorter. That if there's any of you that do any limb lining or trot lining and you saw that short shank hook, you like, what in the world? Because that's totally different than what most people use. And I'm giving up a little juice for you. that short shank hook, they never could leverage it and twist off. It's like using a drop shot hook on a soft plastic.
Mm-hmm.
They can't leverage it and twist off. So there you go. Number 1 from Dan.
Awesome. Very good.
That was good.
Very good. Well, fellas,
I think it's about that time.
It is about.
I'm going to go put a heat pad on my back. I don't know if you noticed me squirming, but part of the reason why I was late, because I was trying to get the rooms done, and about 4 rooms from being finished, I tweaked it.
Uh-oh.
And so I've been hobbling for about the last 4 hours.
Awesome.
Hopefully it'll loosen up by tomorrow.
Well, I hope so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Folks, thanks for watching. We appreciate each and every one of you, especially if you hang out till 9:21 on a Tuesday evening to see a video of my deceased father's trot line.
Why wouldn't they?
Why wouldn't they? I mean, I would.
Me too.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't get any better than Gene.
Nope.
Peace out.
Gene, the dancing machine's what I call it.
Oh, yeah. Super guest.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go
All right.
home, Mr. Crank.
Till next time.